This is Pam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Barbara Mojica. You're an author, educator, and parent. So welcome to the Pam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for inviting me and allowing me to share with your audience.
Now, we always ask any guest on the podcast a couple of questions before we get to the heart of your story. What motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
Okay, what motivates me? Well, two things drive most of my motivations. Number one, history, because I am a historian, and I firmly believe that if you don't know your history, you really don't know what you're talking about, because we need to understand where we came from in order to know the reasons and the motivations behind what's happening today, and then hopefully to use that knowledge to create some kind of framework for a better future. And secondly, as an educator, I'm motivated to help every single child find the best way to learn. And in order to do that, I believe parents have to play a decisive part. I have a 40-year career as an educator, and I started out in general education, working with the general population of children in both private and public schools. And as time went on, I realized that our system was really failing a lot of children, and that they weren't able to learn in a way that would best not only help them be motivated to learn, but in order to enhance their abilities to succeed as a learner. So I switched to special education, and went back to school, became a special educator, and in that career, I worked with children that had severe needs and really needed adaptive types of education. So I learned along the way a lot of different systems, the Wilson reading system to help children read better, um, applied behavioral analysis to help children with autism, and also in terms of an integrated setting where children were learning us- beside one another, children in the general population and children with special needs. And then eventually I even became a director of special ed preschool and an administrator who was able to test, evaluate, and get the services that children needed. So that was the long, winding course of my career that led me to believe today that parents ultimately have to be more active in their children's education. And because our education system here in the US has really declined from being at the top to now number 28 in terms
Yeah.
of world's education. Parents have to seize the moment and find what works best for their child. And there are lots of alternatives that are working. So my motivation is to give parents as many tools as I can to help them find that.
Yeah, I think it's real important. I went, my family really believed in education. I went to Bowdoin College. My brother went to Brown and Harvard Law School, and I'm a software engineer, podcaster, musician. I try to use left and right brain kind of
Right,
both.
and that certainly is.
Um, and in my industry in software design, we have to constantly learn. My brother is a lawyer; he has to constantly keep up. So the learning never stops. You're never done. I think the
Yeah.
problem a lot of times in America is a lot of people think they're done, and they don't continue to be curious. So
Yes.
they don't try to. I'm a big believer in like holistic thinking. I went to Bowdoin. It was more like the Blue Book method, Socratic method. So it really taught you how to learn.
Critical thinking, yes, that's one of the most important skills that a child needs. Not only which largely what our public schools do is they teach to the test, they teach
Yeah.
the facts, but they teach you what they want you to learn. They don't teach the child what's behind that, how to learn.
Like,
So
yeah,
being
yeah.
able to analyze, being able to infer, being able to interpret and compare things. Uh, those skills are kind of pushed to the back.
Yeah, because the SAT type of test versus like at Bowdoin, it was like blue book and oral exam. So you had to explain to the professor at the end of the term, did you actually process it in your own words, not just picking multiple choices
And
that you had
the
to.
whole process of thinking and coming to those conclusions and to those answers, and
Yeah, and so this makes
that's
you have
what's missing.
yeah, the critical thinking, and then today we've got all this, internet is a curse and a blessing because there's so much
Exactly. Yes.
misinformation. I'm an IT person, and I understand, the way these algorithms work in AI, and, basically a lot of things get pushed to the top just because 'cause they're popular, doesn't mean it's factual. Just because something's in the top million views doesn't mean it's actually correct. And so the problem
Yes.
is people are, letting AI write their papers. They're not thinking, through things. And it's very dangerous when people, don't have the curiosity to just not just take what you're spoon fed and actually like ask why, how, what, in terms of like, do you just because somebody's popular, okay, I'm gonna believe this person because they're popular rather than are they actually correct? Do they have any can they cite where they got the information from? Can they prove where what this is? Can they explain it other than something that's like just kind of just like junk food information?
And what do our kids want, especially as they approach the preteens and the teens? The most important thing to them is fitting in. So the social media algorithms play to that, and
Yeah.
they just keep getting fed that same information over and over again because the algorithm says, "Oh, you're watching this, so I'm going to give you more." So then they talk to their friends and say, "Well, this is what I think," and their friends who are on their social media being fed the same information. It goes round and round and round in a big circle, and the
Yeah.
misinformation keeps getting reinforced.
Because now you have people going around saying like flat earthers are back. People are saying like the earth is flat. And you're like, and I'm a
And if
person
it's on the internet, they believe it.
it's a
Oh,
science,
it must be true.
and then, they like science is like pushed down is like, well, I don't believe in climate change or they don't believe vaccines work, whatever you believe. But the idea behind science is like an influencer can say, well, I don't believe this works. And if they get popular enough, the science doesn't matter. It's what that person says that matters.
And
And
that's one of the reasons that I think learning history is so important. And that's being put to the back burner. The
yeah,
schools emphasize uh, math and English, math and reading. And history is so important
we need the
because
context for your
it
math and
teaches
English.
you, it the history teaches you the critical thinking.
Yeah,
Critical, and actually, history is a little bit like science because you
patterns.
you look for a fact and then you try to analyze the facts. You try to see, well, are these real or are they not real? Are they opinions? Do they have real primary sources behind them to back up the information? And then once you get those primary sources, you start to examine things like the context. Well, how does this fit into the other facts that are going on? And how is it being communicated between people? How is how is it being interpreted, and how can you put all of these pieces together? And sometimes in history, the conclusion is there's no conclusion. Sometimes there's more than one answer. Sometimes there is no definitive answer that can be
Yeah, and also, I mean, in terms of history, it's like the victors tend to write the history. So, like, say if you're like in the Soviet Union or Russia, you could have a history that's a certain point of view. It's coming from a political point of view. In China, could be the same thing. In the U.S., it tends to be the same thing because I'm a part Cherokee and I'm part Blackfoot Indian. Indigenous people's histories is not always accurately depicted in American history. So the problem we have is like you have to start discerning where is this information coming from and what
Right.
is
So
yeah,
that the primary sources can, well, are they, or are they secondary sources, which can have inherent biases? Who wrote it? What were the circumstances? Why were they writing it? Were they writing it to defend a certain point of view or to negate another person's point of view? If it's not objective, if it's not written and coming from that time, then it's very, very much suspect. And what do we do in schools? We use a lot of secondary sources
yeah, there's a
and
lot
and and opinions, right? We
yeah,
use a
it's
lot of
opinion.
opinion more and more today with social media. The opinion has taken over the
Yeah, well,
facts.
even books are getting banned because certain people don't like what the book says. So you've got, famous, books that are really part of canons because certain people's belief systems is like, oh, we don't believe in that canon, right? So, or they don't believe in somebody's, alternate, you know, like an argument where you can make multiple arguments and you can back up. If you're a lawyer, you can argue
Hmm.
both sides of the case.
Sure.
If you're a scientist, theories get looked up in science. Like we have certain beliefs in terms of technology, and then sometimes we break through. So the paradigm we had is now not the truth anymore. And
Exactly.
so
Look at just the origin of the earth, how the stories of that have changed over time, and how you have people coming from different angles and different viewpoints, and they have a lot of facts to back them up, but there's no one
yeah,
real definitive answer.
like the end of the dinosaurs. Was it the comet or was it natural climate change of the planet? There's arguments in science arguing multiple angles to
Mhm.
that, right? And so, and it doesn't mean that there's not a little truth in either one. Like tends to be multiple theories can exist, right? And you can have different points of view. And like in terms of like AI and technology, everybody's like, wait, it's the evil or it's the savior. It's a little bit of both.
It is, yes. I mean, you
So,
can use it as a tool, as long as you use it as a tool to enhance factual knowledge that you research, it's fine. But once you depend on it to
well, they're
give you all
biases, but the
the
problem
answers.
there's biases in the machine. People got to understand,
Mhm.
like machine learning is dependent on what you teach it. So machine learning is dependent on the library of information you give it. So if your
And the
library has
prompts that you use to
yeah,
ask the
the
question.
prompts that your prompt engineering and also what's in the database. So what's in the database isn't diverse. Like an idea, what is beauty? If your point of beauty was always is everything in Western civilization doesn't have anything from Eastern or African or other civilizations, then your idea of beauty is going to be limited to just that. So when you do
Exactly,
a
yeah.
prompt engineering, you'll get back the bias.
And you may not answer the question, you may not ask the question in in the way that you're looking in. I don't know exactly how to say this. The way you ask the question may not be the right way to ask the question
Yeah,
for the
you have to keep
answer
on
that
asking
you're
questions.
seeking. Right.
Yeah, yeah,
You
but
have to keep refining and refining.
yeah, some problem is like with the AI, it tends to like to give you what you think you want, what it thinks you want.
Basically,
And
exactly.
if you
Yeah.
don't dig deeper and you just go back with the first response, that's the problem. Is that a lot of people kind of not that they're lazy, well, maybe they are. They don't dig deep enough. They don't go and check. It's like they might just take the first thing that comes back because it's better than a Google search. And it seems like, oh, that could be right. But then you got to push on it. And that's the problem is that do you have the curiosity? Do you have
To
the
keep
the
going.
drive to push a little deeper? And the problem like with history is like you just take the first thing you get you don't do any research, you don't question, then the critical thinking you're talking about, that's the problem. People should understand history because it is the lens that you have that you can look through, and in the context. I mean, I'm a sociology, political science major, and history is it kind of woven through both of those disciplines. But and we look at patterns in both of them because they're kind of a science, but it's science with history tied to it.
And what happens when our kids do a Google search? They tend to look at the first page. Oh, Google says this, that's the answer.
What's at the top?
But but Google has its own algorithms to determine what it is going to put at the top, what it wants to see
Yeah, it's a private
first.
company.
And kids don't, oh, here's the answer. I'll type in the question. Here's the answer. Now, boom. Well, maybe that's not the answer. Maybe it's the wrong context. You haven't compared different viewpoints. You haven't determined if it's a viewpoint. It could just be an opinion. Maybe there are no facts behind it at all. So there it all goes back to that. You've got to ask the who, what, when,
Yeah,
where, and
the
why.
rigor. It's like the rigor of the kind of Socratic method or thinking, critical thinking is like if we live in a world where people don't dive beyond the initial um data that comes back, and because we're just living in this data fed society, and a lot of places you got to look at like, well, who's actually the data, what's the data venue, and a lot of the times if you look at the companies, they have vested interest in certain things because they're invested in certain things, and so you just take that without considering like where's this company got all their assets, like how do they make their profit, do you even look at it, or you just take it for, oh, that's what it is. I just take it face value without doing any work.
And our kids are so used to a world of instant information that they don't want to take the time. It's like, oh, I have to move on to the next thing.
Yeah,
I'm
the
done with
attention
this now.
span is so like I'm a musician, right? And I'm a child of the 70s. And in the 70s, we could have songs that go 15 minutes, take a whole side of a record. Typically
Sure.
today in music, we have songs that we're told that we can only stay within like 2.5 minutes. In my mind as a musician, I don't even get warmed up in 2.5 minutes. My song idea might go a lot longer than that. But we live in a world where the attention span, and I've talked to writers that say, you could write a 200,000 word, book, and now people are being told to write 70,000, 90,000. So like we're being like the attention span of our populace is like limited. And I'm like the in terms of like what are they actually processing? If they can't read a 200,000 word count book and they can't listen to a song more than 2.5 minutes and they can't look at something more than 15 seconds or 30 seconds, what are we processing?
And the attention span is getting shorter and shorter because if you look at what's most popular on YouTube, the shorts. What's most popular on Facebook, the Instagram Reels.
Reels, yeah.
I mean, people want it fast and then they want to move on, but they don't process it. I mean, they look at it for that 60 seconds that they look at it, they think about it, but then how much of that information can the brain really retain on a long-term basis?
Yeah, a lot of it's like
Virtually none of it.
yeah, it's like clickbait. Like they'll have a headline that has nothing to do with the heart of what you read. And you're like, you're just getting drawn into things, these headlines, like tabloid level stuff. It's like, what is this? It's like the level of seriousness drops. And then if you're a person, like a citizen, like your assets are the information. And if you're getting faulty information, then you make faulty decisions.
Which, yeah, in many cases we are. And that's why I think Snapchat and TikTok are so popular with kids. Again, it's instant, it's quick, it gives them one or two lines, and that's it. There's no
No depth.
substance behind the message.
Yeah. It's like you're
Mhm.
trying to get a kid to read Moby Dick or Pride and Prejudice or like, Wuthering Heights is like, oh, there's no attention span. It's like I can't get into that. And
Well,
I'm like,
God forbid something like Middle English with Chaucer or
yeah.
Milton
Or
or
even Tolkien.
any of
Like as a
those.
kid child in the 70s, we were reading Tolkien. And these are massive books. And it's a lot, not that that's Shakespeare, but still today, compared to what the kids are getting today, is like there's a lot more to it. And
But they use the Cliff Notes. That's the shortened version.
yeah,
Everything's got
and
to be quick.
so quick, and it's like you just get you wonder like being a critical thinker, like in my industry, like we have to look at the holistic picture, and a lot of times it's not always like perfect. Like we've done this thing in IT where we have agile method. An agile method is this thing that's in iterative development because we realize we don't know everything, and we realize the limitation of what we don't know. So we can continually improve something. So you get on your cell phone, you see these apps continually updating because we didn't know yesterday what we know today. So we make updates. And so we realize we made mistakes and we fix it. But the thing is like you have to realize it's not always going to be perfect, but you continually try to improve and you ask yourself like lessons learned. But if you don't have a critical mindset, you might not be willing to go dive into what did you do wrong and how can you make an improvement, how can you critically assess like whether or not you're making a mark.
And the trends, what's popular today may not be popular tomorrow. And kids are constantly trying to adapt themselves to the newest thing because they want to remain popular with their friends.
Hmm.
And the newest thing is gone tomorrow. I mean, there's no depth, there's no substance, and there's no continuity in thinking. No, it's just I jump from this thing to that thing to this thing to that thing, and
Well, yeah. Well,
it's great for kids to be curious and to try new things. But when they can't stick to anything,
yeah, that's
then
there's a level of discipline, like in order to master. I'm a musician, right? To master a piano or a bass guitar or a clarinet or violin or whatever, you got to put the time in. You like 10,000 hours of actually muscle memory and actually learning it. But if you got a world with like if you can't get it in 10 easy steps, and if you put it out your song out on Instagram and it only gets one like, then you drop it. Instead of actually taking the time to
Mhm.
like nothing ever is 0 to 100. People take a long time to develop their craft, but if you're looking for that instant gratification, it's just got to be perfect off the bat. Then nothing in art is perfect. In fact, it's like the imperfections are what makes a lot of the art in the first place. In terms of like you talk to painters, you talk to actors, it's like it's the process, and it's not always like what you intended. Sometimes the unintended consequences of what you did, and over time you develop your style, and it's not always a clone or a total copy of somebody else. You develop your own unique voice, and to do that, you have to be willing to deal with the first time you come out the bat, somebody's going to probably say they hate it, and you have to not drop it just because they hate it.
And that's also a common problem with kids today. Uh, they don't take well to criticism. Again, because of the social pressure that they want to be popular and they don't want to be different. So they tend to want to stick to, being part of the group, and that's kind of like this mold that there's no individualization. again, it goes back to learning. We've taken a lot of the individualization out of learning, and kids don't want to be individuals.
Oh
And
yeah,
and it really bothers me because that's a big part of leadership, of recognizing individual viewpoints of people. Because a leader isn't a dictator.
yeah.
A,
Well, that's the
a
problem today.
leader is more of a mentor,
You get the
and
top
that's
down.
what parents have to be. They have to be more of a mentor to their kids. They have to learn to ask the questions. And that you can do this with kids at a very, very young age. You can just ask them the kind of questions like, oh, I wonder about, just showing them things. And I want looking at a house, an old house, I wonder who used to live there. I wonder what they used to dress like. I wonder how they made a living. I wonder if they went to school. I wonder if they ate the same kind of foods we eat. Just stimulating their curiosity
Yeah.
about normal everyday things. And we, a lot of parents don't do that. Of course, they're busy. Everything is
But yeah,
the
they're just letting their
the
smart.
breakneck.
They're letting the devices like be the babysitter. Like me, I was a kid. We had Sesame Street, you had Mister Rogers,
Yes,
we had
yes,
Electric
all of those
Company,
wonderful
and
things.
they just seemed like the people who were behind those things. A lot of them were highly educated, had PhDs, and they kind of knew childhood development. They knew how to get a kid hooked. Get a kid to stay in to Sesame Street. Like you watch it and you'd be locked in. You would
And
actually do
everybody
that.
had their favorites. One of my kids loved Big Bird, and the other
Yeah,
one loved Oscar the Grouch, and uh, they knew uh, that not everybody was the same. They emphasized that in their
yeah,
programs.
I remember that.
They emphasized the individualism,
Yeah, it was
individual.
just like growing up in the '70s, like that was like a strength. The fact that you had like a diversity of like thought, diversity of the characters, different types of situations where people, had maybe had disabilities that you didn't like push them down. And now we have people saying, parents coming into a school committee meeting and saying they got the right to say the R word. Really? Because your freedom of speech, you have the right to say that. It's like, like what kind of parenting mindset is that?
But the worst part is they want to be able to say what they want to say, but they don't want to listen
No.
to what other people have to
Yeah,
say.
they it seems like the bully wants the right. Like I grew up in the '70s, like the bully, in the neighborhood and the schoolyard seems to be now that's the archetype. Like so the bully that's pushing everybody around is not that bright and causing trouble. That is the person to admire. That is the person that has the strength. It
Might make
really
right.
yeah, and that's I thought World War II was like about like not being the thing. You know, it's like it seems like it seemed the lessons of history, like World War II is like, these dictators, these societies were top down. They're like very destructive. Now people are saying that's the way to be. That's the power you want is for somebody that doesn't like diversity, doesn't like individual thought, doesn't like critical thinking, just wants you to follow what they say, and that everything will be okay if you
Like
follow what I say.
the social media thing again.
Yeah,
Um,
it is it to me, like, it's interesting, like, you created this character, Little Miss History, kinda to dr get people back into this kinda Sesame Street, Electric Company, you know, Captain Kangaroo, uh,
well,
you
yeah,
know
my illustrator actually, my husband is my illustrator, and he's been an artist his entire life. And he created this cartoon-like character, Little Miss History, she's really modeled on a younger version of me.
Mhm.
I used to like to hike, so she wears this kind of campy, national park hiker type of outfit. And she wears rose-colored glasses because she has an optimistic view of the world.
That's cool.
And she wears these hiking boots that are oversized, and they're in memory of my father's big feet. She's just like a composite of
Oh,
a
really?
younger me, an adventurer, a travel. I love to travel. I've been all over the world. And she's always curious. She's always searching for answers. So within my book series, she's the one that asks the kids to do critical thinking.
Hmm.
And she asked for their opinions about things. She asked them, was it right? Was it wrong? Like, for instance, in the book about Mount Rushmore and Crazy Horse Memorial, we talk about the Native American rights today, and we talk a little bit about the UN. And we talk about uh, how uh, the Native Americans had a protest, and they started their own monument near Mount Rushmore,
Hmm.
and they're building the Crazy Horse Memorial, and we show that, and then we ask them, do you think we should have one monument or two monuments? Perhaps we should honor both peoples, and we do that in all of my
That's
books.
cool.
I talk about people that have been not mentioned in history, like Alonzo Swan, who helped save um, um, his his ship because he was in a Native America in a Native Black American unit, because of course during World War II there were segregated units. He helped
Hmm.
save the ship from a kamikaze attack, and he was given a Bronze Star. But that wasn't the merit that he should have been given. It was the highest honor, and only a few people survived from that attack. And he kept at it, and he eventually was awarded the highest honor 50 years later.
Yeah,
But
takes a
so
while.
we talk about history can uh, be something that is not always perfect, but if we try to learn from it, we can try to apply it to today and then try to make things better from the future. So I have a whole range of, I just released the 16th book, which is about Alaska. So I have a whole range of these
That's a
books. And
good.
in the books, it's not just history, because we talk about national parks, we talk about geography, like the North Pole, we talk about fossils, like the La Brea
It's very.
Carpet,
I think that's a cool
science.
way to get a kid to get into history, where the kind of normal textbook that I remember, I got into it, but it's like if you make it more enjoyable, if you have you're taking a creative kind of spark as a creator, like the creativity is what makes it like like the way Sesame Street used to teach. Like you got to bring kids in and actually not just talk down, but kind of bring them into it and understand where a kid is and what
Mhm.
they'd be
Well,
interested. So you're taking you're doing the work to
yeah,
actually.
I'm making it multidisciplinary, really. Like, so a kid might be interested more in nature, a kid might be interested more in science, a kid might be interested in um, iconic sites, like some of my books deal with things that everybody knows about, like Independence Hall or the Statue of Liberty or um, the Mount Rushmore, for example.
Mhm.
But some of them deal with other interests that kids might have, like I have one about Tombstone, Arizona. So we talk
Mhm.
about the gold mining and how it grew and how it got destroyed so many times and, and how it's tied to the Old West and that history. So for kids that are, have a bent toward that interest. So I just try to pick topics that might be popular with a wide range of kids and a wide range of interests. Again, getting them to explore different things, different avenues that they might have questions about, and
Make it
then
more fun.
encouraging them to go off. So I
Yeah.
try to entertain them, and I try to inspire them to go off and do more learning. And I try to educate them about a few things that they may or
Yeah,
may not
yeah. It may not
know.
be in the main in the common history book that you get, and I
And
think
of
that's
course, encouraging them to travel
yeah,
because
well,
I
travel,
love
that's a
them
big
travel.
thing. But a
If they
lot of
can't
times
travel, but you know,
make them travel in their mind.
physically, they might be able to travel virtually through the
Yeah, in their mind. Yeah, what the way the world is now, you can travel the way we're through the net. But, it's interesting that, like, the whole idea of, making something fun, making it whimsical, making the entry level more accessible. Like you had said, you're working with special needs kids, so the accessibility is important. But we've kind of got people. My daughter's got a disability, and we've got some people that's like railings that well, we don't need to fund that. We they don't want to fund Department of Education. They don't want to fund
No,
disabilities. They don't want to fund like they can't understand somebody has special needs or somebody has a disability. It's like, well, I don't need to fund that. They're like, where's the sense of community? Like the sense of it's like only like it's a very it's still like a bullying thing. It's like because you don't like it. Like, where's your sense of citizenship and civics of being part of an overall community and like you lift everybody up? That's just the people who are doing okay.
but there are so many ways in education that you can combine things. What's become very popular since COVID, and that's when parents became aware of what was going on in education. When they had to do this virtual learning and they saw some of the things that their kids were being taught or not taught, and became very uneasy with the whole system. So we have so many alternatives now, and I think we need to do more of that. We need to have more charter schools. We have different kinds of homeschools. We have parents who banded together to form these micro schools in the community, and they align themselves with the public schools to a certain extent because many parents aren't aware that even if their child is in a private school, a charter school, a magnet school, a homeschool, they are still entitled to public school services. So their child can still participate in the sports activities and
Yeah,
the cultural activities, the music, the arts in the public school. And more parents are doing that. They're forming their own community schools, and which are more aligned with this kind of achieving the objectives, but allowing the kids to do the process in a different way, focusing more on a more cooperative kind of learning rather than this, okay, here's the objective, the curriculum says we must do this, and this is step A, B, C, D, E, F that you have to follow in order to achieve it,
yeah,
allowing them to achieve it their own way. And my own grandchildren, some of my grandchildren are involved in that. One of them's in two of them twins are in community school where they learn Latin and they learn debate. This is middle school. And then another one of my grandchildren is in a charter school, collegiate prep academy, and at the same time goes to the public school to participate in extracurricular activities. So it is possible to make use of both. But it requires a little bit of work and a lot more effort on the parent to set it up. You
yeah. They have to
know,
be
it's easy
involved.
to just put the kid in public school, and that's
Yeah.
easy. Uh,
Well, a lot of
but
times,
not
like I grew up in public schools in Massachusetts, and it was like tracking. So there's like a trade track, there was a college prep
yes,
track, and there's kind of like a clerical track. And my mom was very involved, and she made sure I wasn't just shoved into the clerical track, that I got pushed and I got into the collegiate track because the automatic. kind of structure with like certain types of kids would not get into the college prep track unless the parents were involved. If the parents were involved, they made sure they got into college track. If they didn't get involved, it would just end up that they wouldn't be there. They'd be in the trade track or the clerical track, and they wouldn't even get to the college prep track at all.
Yeah, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Well, that's the way I always a parent. I was totally involved in everything. My kids went to different types of schools. Also, started out in private school. Uh, One of them went to at the time they had this magnet school program with schools tailored to different interests. So one of my children went to a magnet school for the arts and music. Another one of my children went to one of the most competitive high schools in the country, was a very competitive kid. And for her, that worked. Very large school. One of my other child went to a small school that was an experimental school at the time, funded partially by Bill Gates. It was a magnet school focused on cooperative learning, a small high school with only a few hundred kids, and they did cooperative learning
Mhm.
in their classroom. For that child, it was a perfect education. Didn't like being competitive, didn't like being in large groups. So, even way back then, and I'm talking about the 90s, there were possibilities if you got out there and you looked for it.
Oh
But I
yeah,
had to really dig, and I had to put my kid on a waiting list to get in, and I had to keep going back. I had to keep pushing and asking, "Oh, have you checked the list lately?" You
they
have
have
to
to do the
put
work.
in the
Yeah, like my
effort.
mom, she made sure like they got into the certain schools that were more on certain tracks. Like even going to like the elementary schools and junior high schools, that certain schools within the city were set up for different purposes. And they like arts and trades and technical and college prep. And
I had the same thing. I had in my high school. I went to a private high school, but you had the commercial and the academic track, and then you had one that kind of mixed things. And I had started out in the commercial track because in my family, no one had gone to college, and it was kind of presumed, well, if I went to the school that had this good commercial track, I would get a good job when I got out of school. And I started out that way, but one of my teachers pushed, and it was a history teacher, by the way, who I
mhm,
loved, and I made history alive. She pushed me.
to go
She
into the
said, "You need
college.
to go to college." So I switched and got into that combination track. But as it turned out, the way I started did wind up benefiting me because as I went through college, I was able to use the skills that I learned in that commercial track to get part time work, which paid a lot better than
Mhm.
the average job because I could take Sten at like 90, 100 words a minute.
Yeah,
So I
typing.
could
Yeah,
go out there and get temporary jobs when I was in college to make money to help me pay for my books and things. And that's
yeah.
the way
You're
it
learning
kind of
like
worked.
filing and Dewey Decimal System and learning to type and certain. Yeah, I mean, I got part of that in the school system I was in. They actually had typing class, and they had
Oh yeah, we did too. Yeah. But we
you
had
know,
bookkeeping, we had math skills too.
yeah,
So
yeah,
all of that combined with the academic, it turned out, it helped me to get through the academic and, through college. And then eventually I got a scholarship for graduate school and on and on. But it turns out that being adaptable, but being very dedicated and committed and open to always pulling yourself up, getting
yeah,
getting forward, and being able to look for opportunities and being willing to take the opportunity when it's there, taking the risk. Kids have to learn to become risk takers to a certain degree. If you don't take the risk, you'll never get ahead.
It's kind of like in fusion jazz. There's kind of like this concept. Herbie Hancock and Miles Davis kind of talked about like there's no bad note. There's an opportunity. And the example is like Herbie Hancock was playing with Miles Davis, and he actually hit the wrong chord for a song. He thought it was going
Sure,
to
it's going to happen,
he
right?
thought it was going to be the end, but Davis Miles actually changed his part to match Herbie's changed chord, which is typical of a fusion kind of experimental musician. Is they're not just going to stop the song because you hit the wrong note. They actually will evolve the song. So the idea is like, the bad note could be perceived as a bad note, or you could perceive it as an opportunity to evolve the song, to actually go and tread. You can actually go into different areas where maybe you're not the most comfortable. David Bowie made a statement that as an artist, he liked to, maybe not go into the deep end, but tread water a little bit, to go into an area he wasn't fully comfortable in, to actually challenge himself because he didn't want to just keep on phoning it in with the same thing. So he would change his style, even if something was working. He would just radically shift it and go into a whole nother character. Which, from a commercial standpoint, was like, why would you do that? You should stick with what works. But some people, it is in their DNA. Is like I can't just keep on doing the same thing every day. I gotta challenge myself and go into something that maybe I'm not the best at. Go into soul singing when I'm a rock singer. Bring Luther Vandross in and work on a project, and he actually sings better than you. Not get intimidated that you're actually with somebody that knows something different or better than you, so that you can learn.
And become better
Yeah.
eventually at everything that you do.
Now, that's the thing is like, will you push yourself? Will you get out of your comfort zone? The only way to really learn is to be out of your comfort zone a little bit. We're in this age, like with, AI as a developer, like I knew COBOL, I knew old stuff, I knew the old tech. In order to survive in our industry, we have to learn the new tech. So we constantly have to be going to school to learn and certify ourselves and get new understandings, because it's like, it's exponential in tech. It changes so much. You have to constantly learn. And but some jobs, people will like, they don't might not want to do that, or they never had to do that. But the way the world is today, you need to have the ability to learn. And I think history, it helps you do that in terms of, if you learn history, there's periods of things where the horse and buggy to the automobile. There's a history of radical changes in industrialization, different periods. And so like, there's nothing really new under the sun. If you learn, you realize that there's periods like, oh, you should learn from the past because you can kind of anticipate the
Yeah, if
present.
you look at any timeline for anything, you can see that there in almost every case there's been a dramatic change just over a short period. Even maybe we used to think, oh, things have really changed over 100 years. Now it's like things have really changed over 10 years.
Yeah, it
When
can
you
change in
think
2 years,
about
3 years. Yeah, the shifts can happen so exponential because the technology and then globalization and then the environment. There are things that are shifting. We're going from like category 5 hurricane to a potential category 6 hurricane, from an F5 tornado to an F6 tornado. You know, 3 inches of increase in, ocean height can be catastrophic. Change a couple of changes in degrees of temperature can cause massive changes. So we're seeing shifts that can happen in our time that people thought took 1,000 years, took 10,000 years, took 1,000,000 years. Actually, in our lifetime, we're going to see shifts that happen 10, 5, 30 years.
and when you look at things like communication, how how rapidly communication changes. I mean, your cell phone is out of date virtually the day after you
The day
buy
after you
it,
buy
a new one.
it. Yeah, with tech is out of date the day you get it. You know, the day you buy a new piece of hardware, it's probably, because they're always planning the next thing. So you're like, you try to keep something 3 years, you're like massively out of date. If you get a 3-year-old cell phone, you're like so out of date compared to where it's going. Um, so sometimes you have to shift your mindset. Oh, maybe I shouldn't own it. Maybe I should rent it and get new ones as they come. But like if you're in this mindset, like I have to own it, well, it actually doesn't work with the way the technology works. It actually makes more sense to continually be able to get one because it shifts so much. Like in my career, I have to use it so much. It's like I make sure I always get the latest one. Other people might not be important to them, but it's like you have to start thinking like, what is this, and how am I using it, and what is going on with it? You make assessments.
For me personally, I still prefer the computer in front of me to the cell phone. It's just maybe I'm just klutzy, but I mean,
But yeah,
just the
it's a different
screen,
approach.
the tapping, like to me, it's not as intuitive because I didn't grow up with it at
Yeah,
all,
you're a typer.
and it,
Your typing is
I'm
more
typing is more
connected. Yeah, well, you're a writer
familiar,
too.
connected, yeah, and the when I see my grandkids with the cell phones,
But
but
even
it's
like
second
in music
nature.
today, you've got musicians who, well, yeah, where they're really producers versus a traditional musician, like plays a guitar, plays a horn. You've got these producers that actually really can't play instruments, but they're more like
Tech,
arrangers.
yeah,
They
yeah.
can arrange and they got music theory and they can arrange it. And because the computers have changed so much, they could actually arrange a song and understanding music theory, not actually be able to play what they arranged, which is not uncommon. You know, there were arrangers that did that in the past, but now there are even more people that can do that because of the computer. So you'll run into a musician and you ask them to actually play it on an instrument, they can't do it. They can do it on the computer,
Which
and I'm
is
like,
kind of
wow,
ironic.
yeah. So I'm like, wow, that's different for me because I grew up learning how to play it. So I still like to just sit down and play it till I get it. Versus somebody will say, well, I can just fix that on the computer. I'm like, I'd rather fix it on my instrument and put it into a recorder than to fix it on the grid. So
Because you like the process.
I like to play it
See,
like I'm a musician.
again, the thinking, the how to, the steps, the 1, 2, 3, 4. This has to
What's the
happen
feel?
before that.
Like if you're on a
And
fretboard, if you're on a piano, there's like every little thing that you're doing is making like a statement. When you put that on the paper, yeah, you're making a statement, but like in the moment when you're on a piano or you're on a saxophone, it's that moment that as an artist, that's what you do. I mean, I think that's what an actor would say versus an AI actor. Like the reason why you see Death of a Salesman live in New York is the way the actor performs every night. He does those lines a little different. He
right, again,
he
he's analyzing, interpreting, and even if it's subconsciously,
yeah,
it's a individual, different experience every time.
yeah, versus the AI. AI could program that to happen. It might look great. It might seem like it got it, but if I go see that actor actually do it every night, I'm old school. I'm gonna prefer the actor doing it live. But that's, maybe in the future people will say, "Well, I'd rather see the AI do it." But oh, I'm kind of sad for humanity if that becomes the truth.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's kind of sad as well.
But it seems like important to be able to discern facts versus opinions. As we start to close, we've been kind of getting at that. And somebody, do you have like lessons that you specifically like teach people to understand the difference
Yeah,
between
I
that?
do. I have a whole bunch of resources. Again, I've been getting more and more into this, trying to give people tools and strategies. So I have a YouTube channel, and I do all kinds of things on that. I have history told by kids for kids. I have some videos on that. I do my own videos, like do 2-minute teacher sessions where I give lessons that parents or teachers can use to set up and reinforce certain skills. And one of them is fact and opinion. So I have a few videos on fact and opinion and how you can use simple techniques to help a
Discern,
child
yeah.
learn the difference between a fact and opinion. Uh, you, Starting out with a simple worksheet and then reinforcing that in everyday life. And when kids come home from school, asking them what happened and just talking about things as they come across them. And oh, somebody said this. Well, do you think we could prove that that's something that's a real fact? Or is somebody just thinking about that? Is that just
Hmm.
something that you can't definitively prove? It's you might ask somebody else, and they might say something else. Well, then that's just an opinion. So yeah, things like that. I do videos. I have a blog, and I on the blog I give tips to parents on different things, and I review children's books. So I'm kind of a go-to source for tools and strategies. I have a very active Pinterest board. So
Hmm.
you can find boards on all of these kinds of things, critical thinking, on reading, on math skills, on
Yeah, we
even
do have your link
social
below.
emotion.
Yeah, we do have
So
a link
when
to
you
your
go to my
blog.
website, you can, if you go to my website, you can find all of those things because I have links to the Pinterest, to the YouTube, to the blog. So any parent or teacher who's looking for something, if you go to any one of those resources, you're probably pretty sure of finding some materials that you can find. So whether it's the books, whether it's um, a video, whether it's an article on my blog, or the Pinterest board, just to go to find different ideas. They'll be able to find strategies. And I'm also going to do a course on peer pressure, an online course for
Well,
parents.
that's good. I
I'm
think that's
starting
needed.
that in January, and that on my blog, I have a link uh, to that too, as well if they're interested in that.
We have a very specific link below, but we do have to close. We have another podcast coming up. But I want to thank you for being a guest. That link we have below is fully clickable. I'm assuming that once they click on that, they can probably get to the rest of your primary link on your website.
Sure. Yeah. Hmm.
And that will be fully clickable. We've been live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. We'll be on all the other podcast platforms where you can listen to or watch a podcast by tomorrow. I do want to thank you for being a guest on the show and apologize for our kind of we're wrapping it up at this point, but we do have another live show coming up. But thank you.
I really appreciate the opportunity. It was a very interesting discussion, and I hope your listeners get some value from
Thank you. Have a great night or great day.
it. You too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.